Hi, it's been quite a long time since I've been in any of these videos. I think clear back to the first one. The reasoning for it is because I wanted to prepare you for this. This is the most difficult thing I've run into so far building this airplane, is getting the wings set, getting them installed and setting the sweep and the dihedral and the washout. Very nerve-wracking would be the polite way of saying it. It's taken me about 5 weeks to get this done, and that's not to say it takes 5 weeks to actually get everything set up. That's, spending an hour here or half an hour there, going out in the evening because the equipment I was using needed to be out of direct sunlight, things like that. But it all amounts up to a very long time to get these wings set. If you can get somebody to help you, it's a great idea. I'm doing it by myself. It can be done by yourself, but it is difficult. But just trust me when I say you can finally get to the end of this and get your wings set and be proud of what you did, because it is a very difficult procedure to do, to get everything to match up properly. So just kind of hang in there. First, we're going to go through a little bit of the tools that are just recommended that have come in very handy, and you're going to need some of them, so might as well get an Amazon order or a aircraft and spruce order in. Get your tools ready to go so you can put this together as quickly as possible and with as little difficulty as possible. It's not bad, but there were times when I felt like just torching the whole plane. It was just going to be an easier, outcome to the whole thing. But I'm glad I didn't. My plane actually is going together quite nicely. Still a lot to do. More videos to come after this one. But this one is definitely the toughest in my opinion from what I can tell. And the rest should be kind of a downhill thing. Kind of like the first, 4 or 5 of these videos were pretty easy to do once you realized what you were doing. All right. So let's get started with some tools that you're going to need here. A protractor and a small level are very important. Once the wings are on the plane, you'll be using these constantly to ensure the fuselage of the plane is always level, both side to side and front to back. Very, very important to make things come out right. I picked up sawhorses to set at each end of the wings to keep me from bumping my head into the end of the wings as I did my work. Once you get the wings in place, they're kind of out of sight because they're just about forehead height, and you happen to run into them a lot. Also, these will be used when I skin the plane with Ortex material. Straps of some sort to hang from the rafters are great and highly recommended if you have access to your rafters. At times, these support the wings as you're making changes to them, and other times they act as extra security. So if you're changing something without the full weight on the wings, or they're not fully set up or anything, if they do slip out of position, this keeps them from falling to the ground, which is kind of important. Jack stands are needed to make sure the plane doesn't move while adjusting the wing settings. It is very important to keep the plane level. Leaving the plane on its tires does not give the firmness needed, meaning the plane will rock side to side very easily. On the jack stands, this rocking doesn't happen, and it will save you a lot of headaches. I used a cheap sawhorse from Harbor Freight to hold the tail level. The plane's wings need to be configured while the plane is level, as it will be in flight. Not raising the rear is not an option when configuring the wings. A large 4-foot level or longer is needed. This is used to check the washout on the wings. Washout is important to ensure that if a wing starts to stall, it stalls out on the furthest edge of the wing. This gives the pilot a chance to recover before things go south. I didn't have a 4-foot level, so I secured my 3-foot level to an 8-foot straight edge, and it worked quite well. These are great grinding bits. They are available at Harbor Freight in the air tool section. They work to chew through metal. You'll need them when you notch the spars so the wings will fold. They are not cheap, but well worth the money. You'll need a good drill, and these are not Dremel bits. Now for the fun tools. In the blue bag and next to it to the right, and just below that, are the calicos and the tools to use them. Calicos act as temporary rivets, ensuring alignment as the rivets are put in place. Down below is a Dremel with grinding bits. The bits need to be good ones. Don't go for the El Cheapo stuff. They fall apart. The Dremel's used to do final smoothing in areas on the aluminum and the spar and other parts as you build the plane. The red funny looking gun, that's a pop rivet gun. Of course, you'll be using lots of pop rivets, so make sure you have a good gun. You'll need a number 30 and a 5/16 drill bit. The number 30 drill bits are easily found on Amazon. Typically, they're hard to find even in hardware stores like Ace. They don't carry them. So order some extra of those because they're kind of small and easy to break the bits. You'll probably need 3 to 5. Okay, so I'm going to break this into about 5 different pieces because there's a lot to do. Mounting the wings, putting the struts on, setting the sweep and the dihedral and the washout, finishing up pinning the wings, and adding the doublers, which are support mounts. And we'll start with mounting the wings now. On each side of the fuselage are 2 vertical tubes. These tubes slide inside the 2.5-inch wing spars. A pin drops through the front spar and through the tube. The same happens in the back, but with a bolt, which allows the wing to pivot back to its folded position. I highly recommend a notched block like the one shown. The block is held on with clamps that have rubber pads so they don't slip. The block is there now to prevent the spar from jamming itself into the painted or powder-coated frame of the plane. Notice the cutout notch that's in the block. This helps keep the block centered on the frame. Later we'll use this block to hold the wing in place when setting the sweep of the wing. Since I mounted these wings myself, I used 2 ladders and a 2x4 to hold the outer part of the wing while sliding the spar tubes over the frame mounts. I laid the wing on the ground and situated the ladders. I put the end of the wing up on the 2x4 and carefully slid the root end of the wing over the frame mounts. There is a 5/16 hole pre-drilled in the top of the rear on both spars. Find the retaining bolt for the wings in your build kit and slide it through the hole and into the vertical mount on the fuselage. Remember, there is only one hole in the spar at this time. We'll drill the other hole in the bottom of the spar later. Now that the pin is in the rear spar, it is unlikely for the wing to slide off the fuselage. However, the wing end can still fall down, damaging the root of the wing as well as the end. So secure the wing with straps from the rafters or whatever other support system you decided to use. Following this, use another strap to hold the front of the wing in place. Set up the strap so that you can adjust the wing. We'll need to do this to set the wing sweep. Once you have one wing on, duplicate the process for the other wing. Getting the wings on, not even permanently, still gave me a feeling of accomplishment. Most likely, that's from the look of the build. The thing is starting to look a lot like an airplane. Find your strut rods. You should have 4, 2 being slightly shorter than the other 2. I already have my Heim joints inserted into the strut rods. By the way, they are Heim joints, not hem joints, not hem joints, Heim joints. They are also often called rod joints in the U.S. Either of those 2 terms works fine. Mine are already inserted, as said. Yours most likely aren't, but no worries, we'll get to that. You should have 4 Heim joints and 4 Heim joint mounts. Find them, screw the Heim joint partly into the Heim joint mount, and slide the mount into the ends of the struts. There should be 1 joint per strut, and it doesn't matter which end of the strut rod you put them in. We're going to drill the holes for the retaining rivets. These rivets hold the Heim joints in the strut rods. I'm using a bench drill to help with this process. You can use a hand drill, but the accuracy is much more difficult. My kit manual came with a drill pattern, and I transferred the pattern onto the strut rod. If you don't have the pattern, measure the high mount's length. Do not include where the mount sticks out of the strut rod. Take that measurement and divide by 6. Mark on the strut rod the second, third, fourth, and fifth measurement. You should end up with 4 evenly spaced marks on the strut rod. If you need a straight line down the strut rod to draw the points on, use the notched block of wood to accomplish this. Lay the strut rod into the notch of the wood block. Draw a line where the wood notch and the strut rod meet, then transfer your 4 evenly spaced marks. I used a vise on my drill to hold the strut rod. Notice the strut rod is not pinched in the vise. It's just laying on top of the opening. This keeps the strut rod from wiggling around during the drilling process. Using a number 30 drill bit, drill your first hole. If you're using a drill press like I am, you can drill all the way through the other side of the strut rod. This kills 2 birds with 1 stone. You'll need a total of 8 holes drilled, 4 on each side. If you're using a hand drill, you'll need to repeat the pattern, marking, and drilling on the other side of the strut rod. After drilling your first rivet hole, insert a cleco into the hole. This will prevent the hind mount from unexpectedly turning in the strut rod and causing your holes to be out of alignment. Move the cleco as needed to clear your drill head. Once done, you should have 4, or if using a drill press, 8 nice holes ready for rivets after spreading high sol epoxy into the strut rod. Mark on the hind mount and the strut rod aligned so you can align the 2 parts up again. Remove the hind mount from the strut rod. It may be a little difficult to remove. This is normal. Just put some elbow grease to it. Mix some high sol 9460 epoxy, also known as Loctite 9460. Spread the epoxy liberally down the strut tube. Insert the hind mount, aligning the mark you made earlier. Align the holes of the hind mount with those in the strut rod. Use your rivet gun, inserting a rivet 1 hole at a time and locking it in place. The rivet gun may take 3 to 6 pumps of the handle to get the rivet to pop and lock the rivet in place. Once you have all 8 holes riveted, allow the epoxy to set. Normally that's about 24 hours. Repeat this process for all 4 struts. You'll now need to locate your 2 lower strut mounts. These are the mounts that hold the lower part of the strut to the aircraft frame. They may look like what was in my kit, but a couple of different types were used, so they may look somewhat different. Their function is identical. You'll also need the bolts and washers in your kit for the lower strut mounts. The spacers and washers were made to be able to raise or lower the strut mount. Put them on evenly and finger tight only, centering the strut mount on the mount support. Find the spar strut mounts. There should be 4 of them. They're very heavy. You may need to clean them as they easily rust. These hold the heim rods from the upper part of the struts. They will clip onto the spar as shown, but will be riveted and epoxied into place. Ignore the strut rod here. We're working on the location of the strut mount on the spar. The pencil line shown here is 79.5 inches from the root end of the spar. On all 4 spars, the strut mount should be set the same distance. The mount here needed to be moved to the left to where the arrow is showing, so check your manual. Your strut mounts may be slightly different. My strut mounts were similar, but not the same as those pictured in the manual. The strut mounts can easily be adjusted to be in the center of the spar. There is no measuring or anything, and they can easily be eyeballed in place. So go ahead and get that done. The spar strut mounts will get moved around a bit, bumped, and so on when we get to adjusting the wings for the sweep and the dihedral and the washout. To help prevent damage to the spar, it's a good idea once they're in place to wrap a towel or other soft material around the mount. Then use a hose clamp to hold the mount in place. The clamp should be fairly snug, not allowing the mount to move. If not done already, screw in the heim joint into the joint mount on the strut. Screw in the heim joint until 2 to 4 threads are showing. Make sure the locking nut is on the heim joint, but it's not tight. You'll be screwing the heim joint in and out as adjustments are being made. Do this for all 4 struts. Grab your bolts for the heim joints. Slide the front struts, the longer ones, onto the lower mount that points to the front of the wing. Put the bolt through the front or rear upper mount hole, then through the heim joint, and then out the other side of the mount hole. You don't have to worry about the bolt coming out. The washers and nuts will be used for final adjustment, so they're not needed right now. Complete this task for all 4 struts. Remember, the longer struts go to the front of the wing, the shorter struts go to the back of the wing. Don't worry if the struts at the lower mount touch each other. After getting a general setting position for the wing's dihedral, we'll drill 4 holes per side in the lower strut rods and mounts and epoxy and rivet them together. Then we'll complete this by making final adjustments, adding washers, spacers as needed. At this point, you should be able to loosen whatever you're using to support the wings. Do not remove those supports, but loosening them should be fine. The wings should be fully supported by the struts and the strut brackets, but be careful. If you don't have the upper strut brackets held securely to the wing, you may end up with the wing falling to the ground. If they don't and they stay up, well, a congratulations is in order, as your kit is starting to look like a real airplane. Sweep is the angle of the wings, either forward, neutral, or back. Forward is rarely used because it can cause instability and at the same time create more control in slow or near stalling flight. Kind of strange, but that's the way it works. A neutral sweep is where the wings are straight across from each other. This is mostly used on smaller, slow-speed aircraft, though it has been used on high-speed aircraft. Think of the Bell X-10 first supersonic airplane. It had neutral sweep. Rear-swept wings are typically found on jets and provides better performance for such aircraft. I set my wings to neutral, though the manual does say you can set them to anything you want. Neutral is recommended, and that's what we're going to do here. Make sure your plane is off the ground on the jack stands up front and the sawhorse in the back. Using the protractor or bubble level, check for level and adjust as needed. Don't forget to adjust the sawhorse holding the back of the plane up until it's also level. Do you remember the wooden notched block up front and the strap holding the front of the wing against the block? Now those will come into play, helping to hold the wing in place once the sweep is set. Using a ladder, look for the half-inch tube that starts at the root of the wing and goes to the outer end. Both wings have this tube, and we'll be using it to make sure the wings are straight with each other, meaning zero sweep in the complete wing. Using tape, tape a string over the center of the aluminum tube. You may need to wrap the string over the rib top cap and edge, and then tape it on the end of the wing. You'll be pulling on it, so it'll need to be able to take a little bit of stress. Next, run the string all the way across both wing tops to the other end of the wing. Use a clamp or some other method of holding the string to the wing over the same tube at the other end, but allowing you to adjust the string if needed. Now you can move the wood block towards the end of the wing by about 1/2 of an inch. Loosen the strap holding the wing against the wood block. This should allow the wing to swing slightly forward and backward. You don't need much movement here, just a little. Going between the two wings, watch the string over the top. Once it is centered over the 1/2-inch tube, adjust the other wing. Keep doing this until the string is directly over the center of the 1/2-inch tube, clear across both wings. Check and make sure the string hasn't caught itself on some part of the plane. Once you're comfortable the string is straight, clear across the top of the plane and the wings, adjust the wood blocks to hold the wing in place and lightly tighten up the straps to keep the wings from moving. Your wing sweep should now be set to 0 or neutral. Dihedral is the difference between the wing's height at the root and at the end of the wing. Dihedral goes up towards the end of the wing. Anhedral or negative dihedral goes down towards the end of the wing. This usually is used by military aircraft. Positive dihedral helps the plane to center itself by providing more lift to one wing over the other. This causes aerodynamic force to lift the wing with more airflow, while allowing the wing with less to drop. You'll raise the front of the wing by adjusting the front strut. The way I accomplished setting the dihedral was to use a laser. I recommend a green laser. Mine was under $60 on Amazon. You'll see a red laser in the following pictures. It worked, but was much more difficult to use in daylight. The green laser worked much better, but I don't have any pictures of it, sorry. The procedure is the same. On your plane, tape a piece of paper below the root part of the wing and below the end part of the wing. Align your laser to go across both pieces of paper. Adjust the laser to cross the root end paper 1 inch below the spar. Now the end of the wing needs to be 2.51 or 2.5 inches higher than the root. Since we set the laser at 1 inch lower than the spar, we need to set the end of the wing at 3.51 or 3.5 inches higher above the laser line. You see how this works? So by adding or removing washers on the upper strut mount, heim joint, unscrewing the heim joint, moving the washers up or down on the lower strut mount, or in extreme cases, adjust the upper strut mount on the spar, you'll end up moving the wing up or down. This is a royal pain because the support strap from the rafters can't be holding the wing weight or apply much force to it. The wing has to be setting pretty much on the strut. This makes this process a nightmare. There's a lot of pulling out of the bolts, adding washers, removing washers, moving washers, and it's very easy to go insane at this point. It's a lot of work and very touchy adjustment. Once you get the dihedral where it's supposed to be, you'll do the other wing, which will mess up the first wing you did, guaranteed. All I can tell you is keep going back and forth until you get the dihedral set to the 2.5 inches difference between the root and the end of the wing. It can be done. I was able to do it. I found it easier to use the support straps to get the wing to as close as possible to the correct position. Then I raised the lower strut slightly up on the lower strut mount, only in the front one. Don't do the back one, the rear one or the rear strut mount. We're going to be doing the washout with that, so that don't do any adjustments there. Just leave that thing hanging wherever it's at. But I then drilled holes using the same process as doing the top of the strut to put the rivets in. I then did the entire procedure over again after I riveted and epoxied the lower strut mount. I was able to get the dihedral correct by just adding, moving, or removing some washers from the top of the strut, screwing in or out the heim joint, and adjusting the lower strut mount by moving the washers and spacers up and down in different order. You can do both wings at the same time or one at a time. It's a difficult matter either way. It's just flat out difficult to get this to where both wings are being nice and behaving like they should. If you have questions before doing any of this, you should be on the Badland forum and ask those questions or contact Badland Aircraft. This is the most difficult part of the build, and there's little room for error. You really need to make sure you get this right. I almost forgot. That string across the top, make sure it's still pulled tight. If you have the dihedral set correct, the string should be lifted off the center of the plane, and the string still should be over that half-inch aluminum tube clear across the top of the wings. That shows you got everything right. Washout is sort of difficult to explain. It's a warping of the wing so that the end of the wing is at an aerodynamic setting so the root of the wing will lose lift before the rest of the wing. This helps a pilot to feel a loss of lift before the aircraft goes into a total stall, so it's a good thing. You'll need to set the washout, and don't worry, it's much simpler than setting the dihedral. It's done the same way, but with much less effort, let me put it that way. The washout is set by adjusting the rear strut to lift the bottom of the rear spar up 5/8 of an inch above the bottom of the front spar. This is measured by using a level going from the bottom of the front spar on the end of the wing to the bottom of the rear spar on the end of the wing. I used a long straight edge with my 3-foot level taped to it. If you have a 4-foot level, you're good to go. I took a small ruler and taped it to the level 90 degrees and left 5/8 above the top of the level showing. I put the front of the straight edge on the bottom of the front spar, then put the top of the ruler on the bottom of the rear spar. I checked the level and it was slightly off. It needs to be perfectly level. I adjusted the rear strut just like we did with the front strut, lifting the rear of the wing very slightly. I did this until the bubble showed level. This means I have the rear wing spar 5/8 of an inch above the front wing spar, and the washout is now set. Now it's time to drill and rivet the rear spar strut. Do this just like you did for the front one. Remember to use the high sol epoxy and remember to mark where the bottom of the strut tube ends on the lower strut mount. Now I showed you this picture before, but I didn't really say what you were looking at. If you look at the end of the left wing at the end of the rib and then compare it to the rib over by the fuselage, you may be able to see that the end of the left wing is slightly higher than the rib by the fuselage. This is the washout. Washout is built into the jigs used by Badland, but checking for the 5/8 difference and adjusting as needed is important. Remember, never trust that something is done until you check it. This way you can make any adjustments needed and not be surprised one day in a bad way. Now you're almost to the easy part, securing the front and rear strut mounts on the spars. However, I'll say it again, go check all your measurements. Is the wing sweep still correct? Is the dihedral still at 2.5 inches? Is the washout still 5/8 of an inch? A 1/16 of an inch, even an 1/8 of an inch out of spec isn't really going to cause you any issues, so don't worry about that. More than that, though, and I'd be correcting and making adjustments. But I'm also picky. I actually did correct them many times. It drove me crazy. Once you're satisfied that the adjustments are all done, it's time to lock in those wing strut mounts. Hallelujah! Select a hole at either end of the front or rear, left or right of the spar strut mount. It doesn't matter which one you pick to do first or last. Using the number 30 drill bit, use the strut mount hole as a guide. These are very strong steel components, so unless you really screw something up, you're not going to hurt them. For all the holes you're about to drill, you're going to want to drill the identical hole on the opposite side of the mount. This is going to prevent the mount from shifting. Pick a front or rear rivet hole and drill through the spar. Insert a calico. Do the opposite side on the inner side of the wing, drill and calico. Select another hole, several holes down, drill, calico, do the opposite side, and so on. Drill a hole that is in the lower right of the mount, calico, do the opposite side. Drill the last hole on the end of the mount, calico, and do the opposite side. Again, it's just repeating itself. It's suggested that one hole and calico is the process to follow. Yes, you may be able to get away with drilling several holes and then putting calicos in them, but this is not the best way to ensure all rivets will fit easily and properly into the drilled holes. Once all the holes are drilled, you can remove the calicos. Secure the wing with your straps or other support method. Remove the bolt from the mount, allowing the strut to drop slightly. The fuselage strut mount should be strong enough to hold the strut near the upper strut mount, but you can secure it to the wing if you wish. Remove the mount from the wing. Now that you've got the mount off the spar, you need to clean the spar as directed by the manual. You may need to clean the holes that you've just drilled into it for any burrs. You need to get those smooth. It should be just like the spar itself, pretty smooth. You can use emery cloth or fine sandpaper to kind of rough up the spar slightly where the mount will be placed. This gives the high sol epoxy something to grab onto. And you definitely don't want to lose this, because if you lose this, you lose the wing. So make sure that it's good and clean so that the high sol sticks to it really well. The rivets will take and they'll hold everything in place. So make sure you wipe down everything, also the spar, after cleaning it, removing any liquid from the spar itself. You don't want any water, you don't want any acetone, nothing. It needs to be perfectly clean. Acetone is great because it pretty much evaporates to about 99.9% of itself, so it leaves almost no residue behind at all. You can and should paint your strut mount to help prevent future rusting. Note that you'll have to wait for the paint to dry before you put the epoxy on. You don't mix those two. And mix your epoxy and spread it fairly evenly on the inside of the mount that will connect to the spar. You know, the curved part, you want that all covered in epoxy. It doesn't have to be, real thick or anything. In fact, it should be pretty thin, because when you put that on there, put the mount on the spar, it's going to smash everything in there really tight. So the epoxy will fill out. In fact, it's going to squeeze out of the ends of it. Okay, take the mount and pop it back onto the spar. Watch yourself. There's going to be epoxy kind of everywhere. It has a tendency to squeeze out, like I said, and it just gets to be a big mess. So use a punch or a skewer stick. Stick those through those little number 30 drill holes that you put in there for the rivets, and clean those up, because that's where you're going to put all your rivets. So you need to make sure that all those holes are lined up as best as possible. Start using a few calicos just like you did at first, putting them in a few of the holes to hold everything together, and that helps align all those holes too. Let's see. The riveting is the same as the drilling and inserting the calicos went. Do the front and then move your way down, changing some areas. Try and get multiple areas. Don't do it in a perfect row. Do one and then skip like two, and do another and skip like two, do another, do one down below. This helps to move that mount into the proper place so all the other rivets will go in correctly. And put the calicos, after you've gotten the ones without calicos in them, pull the calicos out of the holes that you still need to rivet. Rivet those, take the calicos, put them in a glass jar or a metal can with acetone in it. The acetone will prevent the epoxy from setting and ruining your calicos. Clean your calicos by sloshing them around inside that can or that jar a bit, and then wiping them off with paper towel or a rag. Now, you don't want to use the calicos you've used and cleaned until they've set for an hour or so and all the acetone has evaporated from them. The epoxy that's squeezed out from under the mount can be wiped off first just with a paper towel, and then get a little bit of acetone on a paper towel and wipe off the rest that's remaining. You definitely don't want a soaked paper towel or anything like that, or a soaked cloth with acetone, because the acetone will then drip off and leak down behind that, between the spar and the brace, and now you have acetone going down where the epoxy is. You don't want that, so just kind of keep an eye out. Don't get sloppy. Use as little as possible of the acetone. Once you have all the rivets in, you can reattach the strut heim end to the mount. The mount isn't going anywhere with the rivets in it. You've got it locked in. It just needs time for the epoxy to dry. Repeat this process for the remaining 3 mounts. It's the same thing. Wash, rinse, repeat, and you can get all 4 of them done in probably a day. It does take a little time. Now, after you have all the mounts in place, one more time, check your numbers for sweep, dihedral, and the washout. Make sure they're all correct. You may still have to do some slight adjustments. You just moved a major part on 4 parts of the wings, 2 in each wing, of course. And so those numbers may change again. You may just also just say, you know what, I'm going to look at this tomorrow. I'm tired. It's been a long day. But congratulations, you've made it quite a ways. The numbers should all be pretty much near what they were before you riveted everything. If not, just make the adjustments. Else, you're kind of done with the hardest part of this build. So congratulations on that. It's an accomplishment. It really is. Now, here's something I didn't mention before, and I apologize for that, but those washers and spacers used for adjusting how the struts hold the wings, the joints and all that, did you put washers on both sides of this and spacers on both sides? Because that's definitely needed as part of the mounts. You don't want those struts to be able to move or wiggle. And so you get them as tight as you can, and then once they're bolted in place, and believe it or not, once the weight of the wing is on those struts, if you've got those washers and spacers in there correctly, those struts will not move. You can jiggle them or try and move them. They will not move. And that's what you want. You want everything locked in nice and tight so that it doesn't wiggle, because think of that. If you're flying and the struts are doing this, that's not a good thing. Okay? So make sure that you've got both sides of whatever mounting point where a bolt goes through. You've got spacers and washers on both sides of those. So the strut should not move up and down or left and right on the fuselage or anywhere else on the plane. Those struts should be good and solid. There might be a little movement, but I'm talking like less than a millimeter, maybe 1 millimeter at the most. But those struts will lock in there really good and tight. And it's funny because then when you fold the wings, you're going to go, but everything is so tight. It's like, yeah, it actually works. It holds the wings very well. Whether they're being deployed or they're in the flight position or they're back in the towing position or folded position. It's really amazing. It's cool. When you get that far, you'll be like, holy crud, it works. And yeah, it does. At this point, you should have the wing sweep, dihedral, and the washout configured and the wings in place on the plane. What's needed next is to put the rear bolt and front pin in each wing in the mounts on the fuselage so that you can actually fold that wing or swing it back or put it into a transport position. There's 2 parts to this. First is to get the pin and the bolt in each wing on the mounts. The second part is to grind a section out of the spar so that when the wing folds back, the spar doesn't collide with the frame of the airplane, and it will do that if we don't get this piece dug out of the way or ground out of the way. Both of these tasks are fairly easy, but time-consuming. Okay, and they do take some patience. So just take your time at this stuff. So let's get to it. Let's get the pin and the bolt in each wing first, and then we'll go for the cutout on the spar. And you'll be a long way. You'll be so happy and proud of yourself for doing this. It's amazing when you see the wings actually fold back towards the back of the plane and nothing goes wrong. You get rather excited about it. So let's get to it. Oh no, not that stringy thing again. Yep. Get up on the ladders. Make sure the sweep is correct. Make sure that white string is right down the center of that 1/2-inch tube all the way across. Check your blocks. The 2 blocks up front, they're on the left. Make sure they're where they need to be and they have not moved. If you drill these holes wrong because you didn't check this, the plane is wrong. There's nothing you can do about it. So this has to be done right. When you're satisfied that that string is down the center line that it should be, and those blocks look good and they're touching the end of the spar there, the front spar, to make sure that it doesn't move, we're good to go. Now, how you mark and drill the hole on these spars is up to you, but I highly recommend you take the time to build the contraption you see on the screen. This was built by Bruce, one of our builders on Badland Forum. It'll allow you to measure and then mark a dot on the spar where the drilling needs to take place. This is an easy build. It's made out of some simple flat pieces of wood, a dowel, and a plastic tube that the dowel will slide through. I know, it looks like a pencil. No, it's not. It's a dowel, trust me. Okay, so the tool is made of several pieces of wood. The first one is setting flat across the top of the frame of the plane and held to the frame with clamps. A similar but shorter piece is then screwed in from the bottom so that it sets vertically. It can turn slightly, but not much, meaning it doesn't wobble or anything like that. Next, another piece similar to the first piece of wood is held on the top with a couple of clamps. Don't screw this in. It needs to be separate and able to be moved anywhere on the vertical piece of wood. At the end of the above piece of wood is the dowel that fits in a plastic tube. The tube, as you can see, is zip-tied to the wood. Tape is on the dowel, which still allows it to slide through the tube, but there is resistance. It will stay inside the tube if you let go of it, at least most of the time. Depends on how much tape you put on. The dowel also has been shaved like a pencil to form a point. Now, it's not a real sharp point, but it's pointed, and that's where paint will go to mark on the spar where you need to drill. Once you've created your marking tool, make sure the rear spar retaining pin is still in the rear spar and the frame of the plane. Next, remove the strap used to keep the front of the wing from moving away from the notched block of wood. We need the spar out of the way far enough so the dowel can slide down the vertical metal tube on the front of the plane. Next, gently slide the front of the wing back. Hang on to the wing. It may want to swing further back than needed and damage it or the aircraft's frame. Next, you'll wiggle and move the tool around on the top of the plane, along with extending or retracting the top piece of wood with the dowel on it. You want the dowel to be directly in the center of the tube. You can slide the dowel down into the tube if it helps. Once you have the dowel where you want it, you will need to carefully lift it up. It's time to be very gentle and not bump anything that might move the dowel. Now have some paint handy. I just sprayed some on top of a piece of wood and then I touched the paint to the tip of the dowel. Try not to touch the point of the dowel itself with whatever you're using to transfer the paint. That'll move the dowel out of where it needs to be. Just touch the tip of the dowel with the paint. Now gently move the wing back into the position where the spar is touching the notched block of wood. Quickly, and yes, you're going to do this again one more time, check your sweep. Go look at the string on top of the wing. Make sure the sweep is correct. If the sweep is still good, and it should be, or the notched block might have moved and you'll have to fix that, but if the sweep is good, then slowly lower the dowel down onto the top of the spar. Lift the dowel back up. You should have a nice little dot on the top of the spar. If you're not comfortable with how you did this process, wipe off the paint and do it again. No problem with that because I think I went through 3 or 4 times before I was satisfied that the dot on the spar was really exactly over the tube that's inside the spar. Once satisfied that you have the dot where it needs to be, mark it lightly with a punch. Use the number 30 drill bit and drill a pilot hole. Make sure you do not drill over the vertical tube. Move the wing so that nothing is inside the spar where you're drilling. Once you have the pilot hole drilled, switch to a 1/4 inch bit. Do not drill to a 5/16, and yes, there is a reason for this. You'll use a round file, Dremel, grinder, or something similar to manually enlarge the hole to 5/16. Next question, why? Because even as accurate as the hole is using the Bruce spar mounting tool, the hole can still be a little off. You will swing the wing back over the tube and manually enlarge the hole so that the tube and the hole in the spar line up. You'll notice that the hole in the spar on my picture is slightly messy. That's because of the hand enlarging of the hole. The wooden block should hold the spar in place so that it doesn't move while you're doing this enlarging of the hole. Once the pin slides through the spar and the tube in the spar, you can lightly use a 5/16 bit to clean up the hole. You can also see in the picture how the hole is nice and clean here. A reamer also works really well for the cleanup. At this point, you should be able to use the 5/16 bit and drill all the way through the bottom of the spar. Make sure you're drilling through the tube that's in the spar. Use a reamer or Dremel to clean up the drilled hole on the bottom. The pin should now slip all the way through the top of the spar, the tube inside the spar, and through the bottom of the spar. This will secure the wing from swinging. You can now remove the notched wooden block. You're going to really like how easy it is to do the rear hole. Since the spar in the rear already has a hole in the top that is 5/16 inch, guess what? You get to use the 5/16 inch bit to go through the bottom hole. This is so easy, there isn't need for pictures. Remove the bolt from the rear spar. Since the bolt is already over the tube that is inside the spar, put the drill bit through the top hole, through the tube inside the spar, and use it as a guide and drill through and out the bottom of the spar. Remember to clean up the holes, drop the bolt in through the hole, and you're good to go. Do this same process for the other wing. Once done, you can remove the pins from your front spars and partially swing the wings back. Don't swing the wings more than about 20 degrees. The next part still needs to be done, and then you can swing your wings a full 90 degrees. When you fold the wing back, the spar rotates 90 degrees back down the side of the plane. The part where the arrow shows must be removed to prevent the spar from contacting the chrome moly tube as shown by the other arrow. Without removing this part of the spar, the wings won't fold back and may be damaged along with the chrome moly from the spar. Put your support strap on the end of the wing and ensure it's holding the weight of the wing, not just lightly strapped to the wing. Make sure your front retaining pin is still in place. Remove the lower strut bolt holding the wing, but don't put it on the ground like I did here. It's where you can kick it across the floor and have fun looking for it. The bottom of the strut should slide out fairly easily. You can lay it on the floor, it won't hurt it. Next, very gently push the wing forward. The rear spar should come off the support mount. We need a gap between the spar and the mount to accomplish the next step. I created a fake spar like the end of the real spar on my 3D printer. I cut it down to the same width as the real end spar is from the end rib. You can find the .stl file for a 3D printer on the Badland forum to print this fake end spar. You can see how the fake spar is very similar to the real one. Next, I made a template out of tape and reverse taped it onto the real end spar. I poked a hole in the tape both on the top and bottom where the hole in the spar is located. I removed the tape from the real end spar. I put the tape on the fake end spar and drilled holes where the tape had the holes poked through. I put the fake end spar back on the plane on the mount where the real end spar will be sitting. The fake end spar will rotate just like the real spar will. You can now see where the problem is. The fake end spar won't turn a full 90 degrees. I don't show the cutting of the fake end spar, but I cut out little by little until the fake end spar would turn a full 90 degrees. I cut a line through the fake end spar so it would fit over the real end spar. I then drew a Sharpie line through the cutout to the real end spar. This is now how I had a pattern, so I knew what I needed to cut, or may need to cut. You can now swing the wing back onto the rear mount and put the bolt back in place. Don't forget to slide in the lower strut mount at the same time. The spar cutouts have been done a number of ways. It's really up to you. Here are a few examples and what I ended up doing myself. Using a grinder, you can start to chip away, removing the aluminum bit by bit. Be patient and don't hit the mount. This isn't a super slow process, but it's also not a quick one. A little bit at a time, fold the wing back and check, making sure the spar where you chipped away doesn't touch the chrome moly tube. Keep chipping until the wing can swing all the way back and then a little more to ensure that the spar never touches the chrome moly tube. Now use your file and Dremel to clean up the rough cuts from the grinder. Now here's the great part. You don't have to do this process on the other wing. You already have a pattern to follow, and I'm not talking about the 3D printed fake spar. Once you've cleaned up the first spar cut, put a piece of paper inside the spar. Trace the cutout on the piece of paper. Cut out the traced piece and flip it left to right, not top to bottom. Now put it on the other spar and trace the line around it. Make sure you align the top of the trace with the top of the chrome moly tube, maybe slightly higher. Follow the same grinding process you did on the other wing. Once cleaned up, you're done. And this completes the install and configuration of the wings. Congratulations. On a side note and a little bonus material, I made some shims out of aluminum sheet metal. You may have noticed the wings have some movement up and down when pinned and bolted in on the fuselage. These shims go between the spar mount and the spar itself. They are made by putting the aluminum between two washers, then put the washers in a vise or a clamp. Drill a 5/16 inch hole through the center of the washers and the aluminum. Then put them on the plane and no more movement. It's really nice.